Mirror Group newspapers and calls for a criminal investigation into those he holds responsible. Piers Morgan denies ever hacking a phone when he was editor at the Mirror and returns file.
He talked today about the appalling behaviour of the press. But this is a guy who's repeatedly trashed his family in public for hundreds of millions of dollars, even as two of its most senior and respected members were dying, his grandparents.
I have great admiration for Prince Harry for not entering into the Faustian pact that the royal family had entered into before with the tabloid press. He broke that.
Israel admits killing hostages being held by Hamas in a friendly fire incident in Gaza on the day a cameraman also died in an IDF airstrike. Police searching for Gaynor Lord find a woman's body in the River Wensum in Norwich. A medical report finds that the Friends actor Matthew Perry died from the acute effects of the drug ketamine.
I go out for a quiet patch, and when I get back, you've ruined me home!
Tributes to the actor Steve Halliwell, known for playing Zach Dingle in Emmerdale, who's died at the age of 77. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. A great day for truth, but the mission continues. Prince Harry's reaction after winning 15 claims against Mirror Group newspapers of unlawfully gathering information for stories published about him. The Prince was not in court, but via his lawyer said the ruling was vindicating and affirming and called for a police investigation. Piers Morgan, who denied any allegations of hacking while he was editor at the Mirror, attacked Harry, saying he was trying to destroy the royal family. Our first report comes from our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, and a warning, there is some flash photography.
In his fight with Fleet Street, it's round one to Prince Harry. A judge ruling he is the victim of hacking and blagging, obtaining information by deceit. Not only that, but senior staff at Mirror Group knew about it and turned a blind eye. Read by his barrister, Harry's statement said it all.
Today's ruling is vindicating and affirming. I've been told that slaying dragons will get you burned. But in light of today's victory and the importance of doing what is needed for a free and honest press, it is a worthwhile price to pay. The mission continues.
The judgment said there was extensive phone hacking at Mirror Group papers. It considered 33 articles about Prince Harry and ruled 15 of them were written using information unlawfully obtained.
Mirror Group said nothing, none of those articles was illegal. Zero, zilch, nada. But in fact, half of them were, and if you extend that to the rest of the articles, that's going to be about 60 articles. That's a hell of a lot of unlawful activity that he's been able to prove, even though it was years ago and many of the documents have been destroyed.
This ruling means over 100 more claims could now be heard. In a statement, a Mirror Group spokesperson said, "We welcome today's judgment that gives the business the necessary clarity to move forward from events that took place many years ago. Where historical wrongdoing took place, we apologise unreservedly, have taken full responsibility and paid appropriate compensation." And to that, Prince Harry was awarded £140,600. The judge concluding his phone was hacked to a modest extent. But this wasn't about the money, it was about those responsible, including Piers Morgan. The judge said there can be no doubt he knew about phone hacking while at the Mirror.
I've said all I'm going to say. I'm really sorry.
He hit back bullishly.
Prince Harry's outrage at media intrusion into the private lives of the royal family is only matched by his own ruthless, greedy and hypocritical enthusiasm for doing it himself. He talked today about the appalling behaviour of the press. But this is a guy who's repeatedly trashed his family in public for hundreds of millions of dollars, even as two of its most senior and respected members were dying, his grandparents.
Harry hasn't always won public support, but today was a victory. This isn't just a win for Prince Harry. For him, it's outright vindication. The tone of his statement is striking, laying bare an absolute determination to take on the tabloids. Harry's not finished, with 2 more tabloid cases to come. For now, though, the headlines about him, something he will want to read. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Well, the case has shone a spotlight on the behaviour of journalists and the culture in newsrooms. Now campaigners are calling for more regulation to rein in newspapers, as our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer reports.
A partial victory for Prince Harry with profound implications for the British media landscape. While newspapers say they've moved on from the dark arts of 20 years ago, the passing of time doesn't stop those who were in charge back then from being any less culpable. The ruling that those in senior positions at MGN, like former Chief Executive Sly Bailey and former editor Piers Morgan, knew about hacking and blagging, now puts the ball firmly in the police's court. Despite Morgan's repeated denials over the years, if the law was indeed broken, it's no longer a civil matter, but a criminal one.
I've never hacked a phone or told anybody else to hack a phone, and nobody has produced any actual evidence to prove that I did.
About time, say the whistleblowers who've repeatedly alleged top management knew and covered up.
It's difficult for me because, I don't want to see journalists go to jail or lose their jobs, but at the very least they could tell the truth.
If you're wondering whether those employing Morgan for his journalistic integrity might consider taking him off air in the interim, well, that'll be for his Talk TV boss Richard Wallace to decide, also a former editor of The Mirror. More widely, the court's ruling will have a domino effect for other newspapers involved in legal proceedings with Prince Harry. Many of those private investigators who worked for MGN worked for their titles too. It, of course, also calls into question everything that was said under oath back in 2011 at the Leveson inquiry. The judge finding that at the same time as the public inquiry into culture, practices and ethics was taking place, remarkably, the practice of unlawful information gathering still continued. Up until now, the Conservatives have leaned towards less regulation, in fact dropping the second part of the Leveson inquiry. But campaigners would argue that this judgment is evidence of a press regulatory system that's failed. The question is whether the government will want to change anything. Will they want to go to war with the newspapers with an election looming? From the Prime Minister, strong words, but nothing promised.
I believe, obviously, in a free and fair press, but ultimately everyone needs to operate within the law. That's what anyone would expect, and that's exactly what this country's always been proud to stand behind.
A royal reckoning with print media, unleashing a can of worms.
I'm not a royalist, but I have great admiration for Prince Harry for not entering into the Faustian pact that the royal family had entered into before with the tabloid press. He broke that, and it was a very bold, brave thing to do. And I think there will be repercussions.
The ruling might be over practices from a different era, but the judgment is damning. At a time when the newspaper world is dying, of redundancies, of struggling readership numbers, the fallout from Harry's battle for accountability looks set to unleash hell when the industry was already on its knees. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
In other news, the Israel Defence Forces have tonight admitted killing 3 hostages being held by Hamas in a friendly fire attack in Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described the deaths as an unbearable tragedy. The 3 hostages were killed in the northern Gaza neighbourhood of Shujayyeh. And in Khan Yunis, 1 Al Jazeera journalist was killed and another injured after a missile was fired from an Israeli drone in the southern Gaza Strip. Sky's Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, has this report.
Israel's bombardment of Gaza hasn't let up one bit, and the death toll of Hamas fighters and Palestinian civilians keeps rising daily. Our team filmed in Al Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis as the bodies of more dead arrived from another Israeli airstrike. The grief and anger is uncontrollable. The bodies are put on the corridor floor. Space in the morgue ran out a long time ago. A man refuses to leave the bodies of his relatives. He lies on the floor and puts his arms around them.
A F-16 jet threw a rocket weighing a ton at them. They were all innocent children.
An Al Jazeera journalist, Wael al-Dahdouh, is being treated in the same hospital. He was injured by shrapnel from an airstrike as he filmed the aftermath of an attack on a school in Khan Yunis. His cameraman, Sama Abu Dhaka, was killed. For many in the Arab world, al-Dahdouh has been the face of coverage from Gaza during the war. His wife, daughter, son, and grandson were killed in an airstrike a few weeks ago. The Israeli military says it has launched its first major attack on Rafah in the south of Gaza. The area is right on the Egyptian border, and it is where thousands have fled to for safety. But Israel believes it is one of the last Hamas strongholds that they haven't properly targeted yet. The IDF released this video of their soldiers operating today. They've also announced that they accidentally killed 3 Israeli hostages during fighting in Gaza. They say it was mistaken identity. The dead hostages have been named as Yotam Haim, Samad Talalka, and Alon Shamriz.
During searches and checks in the area in which the incident occurred, a suspicion arose over the identities of the deceased. Their bodies were transferred to Israeli territory for examination, after which it was confirmed that they were 3 Israeli hostages.
Tonight, for the first time in many weeks, Hamas fired rockets on Jerusalem. Despite the intense, months-long Israeli military operation, Hamas was showing it is still able to fight. Israel has not eliminated it yet, and this will be proof for Israeli leaders why the war cannot end now.
And Alistair joins us now live from Jerusalem. And Ali, there's been huge diplomatic pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu in the past week. But these hostage deaths risk unleashing real domestic unrest, don't they?
Yeah, well, before October the 7th, Benjamin Netanyahu was an increasingly unpopular Prime Minister of Israel because of controversial judicial reforms. And then what happened on October the 7th saw Israel really come together as a country and unite behind the Israeli government and the Israeli military to avenge those Hamas attacks. But as the war has worn on, and we're now entering into the 3rd month of it, you do start to see divisions, and that dissent against Benjamin Netanyahu is starting to show itself again, particularly amongst the families of people still being held hostage in Gaza. There is a feeling amongst many of them that the government has not done enough to try and release them and has prioritised the military operation over negotiations to get the hostages out. And the news today that 3 of those hostages were killed in a friendly fire incident will do nothing to temper their anger. And tonight there has been a protest in Tel Aviv outside the Ministry of Defence, where the War Cabinet sits, demanding that the government does more. It has been a very sad few hours here, not just with the death of those 3 hostages, but also with the news that Sama Abu Bakr, the cameraman for Al Jazeera, also died today in an Israeli airstrike. So there's been tragedy on both sides. There is pressure, of course, for the negotiations to begin again and to try and find a way of having a ceasefire to release more hostages. From what we understand, if that is going to happen, it is still weeks away. When the ceasefire broke down last time, the trust between the 2 sides really collapsed. There is one positive piece of news here from tonight that has come out of the visit of the US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and that is that after weeks of American pressure on Israel, they have agreed to open the Kerem Shalom crossing, which is a crossing between Israel and Gaza. And in theory, and we'll wait to see what happens in practice, but in theory, that should mean that a lot more humanitarian aid can get into Gaza where it is really needed.
OK. Alistair, thank you. Specialist divers looking for a missing mother of 3 have found a woman's body in the River Wensum in Norwich. Gaynor Lord was last seen in the city centre a week ago when she'd left work early. Sky's crime correspondent Martin Brunch reports from Norwich.
Mum, go ahead.
By midday, the police search focused on a new and precise part of the river. A small orange buoy marked the spot. First, sonar equipment was used to scan the area. It established what appeared to be a body. Then a single diver was sent down into the swollen waters. He spent a few minutes submerged before confirming the tragic discovery.
Today, police specialist divers have found the body of a female in the River Wensum after a detailed and methodical search over the past few days. Whilst we establish her identity, our thoughts are with Gaynor's family at this difficult and distressing time.
Mother of three, Gaynor Lord, vanished on Friday afternoon a week ago. She left work early. CCTV caught her journey through Norwich city centre. At times, she appears in a hurry. At one point, she dodges her way through moving traffic. She spent half an hour in the grounds of Norwich Cathedral, but police have no evidence she met anyone. The last sighting showed her heading to Wensum Park, where her phone, coat and other items were found. The body was discovered in the river, about 300 yards from where police think Gaynor went into the water. They don't believe she was the victim of a crime. As the tragic news spread through the city, sympathisers brought flowers to the park gates.
I followed the story constantly since it broke on Friday and prayed with everything that she would, hopefully be found safe and well.
After initial forensic tests, the body was taken away for closer examination. Police still need to confirm the cause of death. There'll be a post-mortem examination in coming days, and they will continue to try to establish what it was that drove Gaynor to disappear in the first place. Police were supporting Gaynor's husband and children, whose worst fears have been realised. Martin Brunt, Sky News, Norwich.
The death of Friends actor Matthew Perry caused shock across the world. And tonight we've learned more about why he died. Our correspondent Amelia Harper joins me in the studio now. So what more do we know now?
Well, we now know that the 54-year-old actor died from the acute effects of ketamine. Now, this announcement was made by the County of Los Angeles Department of Medical Examiner. And in this report, it says he had been taking a ketamine infusion as a treatment for depression and anxiety, but that the last time he'd had that was about 1.5 weeks prior to his death. So the reports concluded that that was not the cause of death. We've also had some more details in this report. The medical examiner says contributing factors in Mr. Perry's death include drowning, coronary artery disease and the effects of buprenorphine, which is used to treat an opioid use disorder. So his death has been confirmed as accidental. We know he was found unresponsive on the 28th of October in his pool at his home, but we now know the cause of his death.
OK, Amelia, thank you. The British boy found in France after being missing for 6 years is expected to return to the UK this weekend. Alex Batty, who's from Oldham, was 11 when he disappeared with his mother and grandfather during a family holiday to Spain in 2017. Adam Parsons reports.
On this isolated stretch of road, Alex Batty's life changed. This is where he was found, walking through the rain in the middle of the night, 6 years after he disappeared. Alex, pictured here at the age of 11, says he was taken to a series of communes with limited access to the outside world.
They would travel house to house with solar panels. They only used car sharing and they didn't have their own vehicle. Always in places with large houses where there were many families with around 10 people, coming and going, never the same people.
Alex said he was taken to Morocco, Spain, and then here to France. He told authorities his grandfather died 6 months ago, but said the final straw was when his mother told him she wanted to move again.
His mother indicated he was going to leave with him to Finland. This young man understood that this needed to stop, so he decided to leave where he was with his mother and walked for 4 days and 4 nights. He was just walking at night and sleeping during the day.
Alex was found by this man, Fabian Accidini. Last night he told Sky News that Alex told him he just wanted to get home to his grandmother. So Fabian took him to this police station in the town of Revel, 30 miles from Toulouse, where Alex, exhausted, fell asleep on the floor. In a statement, his grandmother, Susan Caruana, who is Alex's legal guardian, said, "I cannot begin to express my relief and happiness that Alex has been found safe and well. I spoke to him last night and it was so good to hear his voice and see his face again." 6 years after his disappearance, Alex Batty decided to leave his mother behind and trekked for 4 days to end up here in the middle of the night, in the pouring rain, clutching a skateboard. And this is where he was rescued. Now, on the one hand, this is a tale of endurance and fortitude with a happy reunion to come. But it's also one about estrangement and fear. The whereabouts of Alex's mother are still unknown. That investigation will come, but the next step will be Alex's return to Oldham tomorrow. Adam Parsons, Sky News, southwest France.
Fears are growing for hundreds of thousands of displaced people in Sudan as fighting between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces spreads to the south. Wad Madani, a major city sheltered from fighting, has taken in nearly 500,000 civilians since the war began 8 months ago. But now, as the Rapid Support Forces gain momentum and advance towards Wad Madani, many fear a takeover of the city would likely trigger more displacement and deepen a worsening humanitarian crisis. Former New York Mayor and Donald Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani has been ordered to pay more than $148 million in damages after defaming 2 Georgia election workers. Mr. Giuliani accused Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss of voter manipulation and of stealing votes from Donald Trump after the 2020 election, destroying their reputations and causing them extreme emotional distress. Sky News has learned that one of Britain's leading care providers has been forced to issue a warning after discovering people are impersonating the company in order to charge migrants looking for work thousands of pounds in so-called fees. Becky Johnson reports.
I wanted to go to the UK because my boyfriend moved there and I needed a visa in order to stay there.
Amy is still determined to come to the UK from South Africa, despite the government tightening immigration rules. She's been applying to work as a carer.
That was the job and the sector where most jobs were available.
It's also a sector where the government has vowed to stop abuse of the visa system, as widespread exploitation of foreign care workers is under investigation. Amy thought she'd secured a job with Care UK until she found out this job offer was fake, written by someone impersonating one of Britain's best-known care providers.
I was very, very upset because it was such a long process to try and get the visa, and then when I thought it was going to happen, I was so happy about that.
She'd applied via an agency, Zidane Consultancy, based in Manchester. They quoted fees of £4,500. She paid an initial £500 and did a remote interview with someone she believed was from Care UK, but they weren't. Amy had become the latest victim of a scam that Care UK is warning about, fraudulent job offers being made in their name.
It makes me very angry because they're using the Care UK name, but they're also trying to extort money from people.
They're now working with the Home Office and police.
This does need to be looked at from a government perspective and not for companies to have to be relied on to fix it.
As part of the government's new measures to cut migration numbers, all care firms will have to register with the Care Quality Commission regulator in order to get sponsorship licences to recruit abroad. But that won't stop agencies fraudulently impersonating legitimate providers to illegally charge foreign workers.
I think a more effective approach is actually targeting the abuse directly by ensuring higher standards, by resourcing the labour inspectorates properly, by ensuring that people are able to report abuse in a way that protects them.
You are through to Zidane Consultancy Limited.
We've called, emailed and messaged the director of Zidane Consultancy outlining our allegations and asking him to respond. We're still waiting to hear back. The Home Office says it doesn't tolerate abuse in the labour market and takes action when exploitation is identified. Care UK says it would never charge any money to applicants. Meanwhile, Amy still hopes to find a legitimate sponsor so she can move to the UK. Becky Johnson, Sky News.
An offensive being led by an alliance of armed groups in Myanmar is threatening to destabilise the country's ruling military junta. It came to power in a military coup nearly 3 years ago after seizing power from the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. The military's violent suppression of public protest triggered an armed rebellion which now spans much of the country. The military junta, which still controls the cities and roads in central Myanmar, has been losing ground, including a number of key border crossings. Earlier this year, Sky News filmed with the rebel forces in the country's jungles, fighting to win back territory. Our Asia correspondent, Cordelia Lynch, travelled to Mae Sot in western Thailand and sent this report.
Mae Sot is a frontier town full of Burmese migrants and refugees. Some have to live in secret. Most are trying to make ends meet. Many have fled civil war in Myanmar, and that war has taken a dramatic turn. Rebel groups are newly emboldened, given hope by an alliance of 3 ethnic armed groups who launched an operation in October to overthrow the junta. The military has lost critical territory in Shan State on the border with China. Trade and roads have been blocked, and whole units have reportedly surrendered. Muon Tonya is a member of the People's Defence Force. He escaped to a border area 2 months ago so his wife could give birth. Now he's staying in a safe house, hoping he'll soon rejoin the fight.
Why do you think the rebels are gaining more ground right now?
The rebels are making change and making institutional reforms. The reason we're gaining more ground is because of our mindset. We really want to fight against the junta. We're fighting for our rights and we're hungry for success.
How dangerous is it for people right now in Myanmar?
People in Myanmar can't even sleep freely. They don't feel safe during the daytime or nighttime because the military knock at their doors and threaten their safety.
More than 500,000 people have been displaced in less than 2 months.
The Myanmar military is looking more vulnerable than it ever has since it seized power in a coup nearly 3 years ago. It's lost money, lost ground, and it's facing defections.
The military does say China has helped mediate talks with the rebels, but the alliance and other opposition groups sound defiant.
Are you confident that you can actually topple the regime?
It will be not realistic to say right now, but what we can say is the momentum, the growth of the resistance forces is now getting stronger, smarter, and greater experience.
There is little sign the Myanmar regime is about to collapse. It is far from outgunned, but it does look overstretched and under pressure. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Mae Sot, Thailand.
Finally, tributes have been paid to the television actor Steve Halliwell, who's died at the age of 77. He was best known for playing Zach Dingle in Emmerdale.
I go out for a quiet patch, and when I get back, you've ruined me home.
He appeared in the soap for 29 years, becoming one of its integral characters as head of the Dingle family, and last appeared in the series in June. His family said he died peacefully with his loved ones around him. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by political commentator Benedict Spence and the writer and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, Prince Harry's court victory over Mirror Group newspapers today. Although, as you can see from tomorrow's Mirror itself, the paper is ignoring the story on its front page and leading instead on the scrapping of a question of sport by the BBC. We'll be right back with that and other stories.
Five of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. The Duke of Sussex has won £140,000 in damages from Mirror Group newspapers after a High Court judge ruled his phone had probably been hacked to a modest extent. The Israeli military has said its forces killed 3 Israeli hostages in Gaza when they were wrongly identified as a threat. And police searching for the missing mother of 3, Gaynor Lord, have found a woman's body in the River Wensum in Norwich. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the political commentator Benedict Spence and the writer and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Daily Mirror completely ignores its defeat in the High Court today over Prince Harry's phone hacking claims and leads instead with exclusive news that the BBC is axing the quiz show A Question of Sport after 53 years. And there's very little mention on any other front page. The Sun speaks to the grandmother of Alex Batty, the boy who turned up after going missing for 6 years, who tells of her joy at hearing his voice. The Financial Times says Western nations may seize Russian central bank assets to fund Ukraine's war effort, as the US and Europe look like cutting their own financial support. The Telegraph says London Mayor Sadiq Khan has blocked a plan to send cars to Ukraine that would otherwise have been scrapped for failing to comply with ultra-low emissions standards. The Times has been looking at GP waiting times and reports that millions more people are now waiting over a month to see their doctor. The Eye has seen data suggesting that more than 1 in 5 fixed-rate mortgage deals are due to come to an end next year and are expected to leave their 1.5 million holders financially worse off. Half-price Christmas, that's the front of the Daily Mail, but says major stores are already holding big sales to try to shift unsold stock before Christmas. The Star is outraged at the opinion of some boffins that the humble potato isn't good enough to call itself a vegetable. So what should it call itself? A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Benedict Spence and Amy Nicole-Turner. Welcome to both of you. You'll know that we're not going to be discussing the humble spud, first of all. We're going to be looking at the Telegraph front page and their headline there, Piers Morgan, Harry is on a mission to destroy the monarchy. Those were the words that he delivered in defence on his doorstep following the court's judgment. Benedict.
Yes, and I mean, this is, it must be said that this is a part of a narrative, I suppose, that has been discussed at great length, I suppose, by Piers Morgan. And you know, this case has been going on for a very long time. The crux of the story is that just under half of the claims that were brought, the judge found agreed with Prince Harry, 15 of the 33. So not a complete sort of a slam dunk, but still rather a lot of erroneous doings, shall we say, at the Mirror Group. They welcome it. They say that it gives them an opportunity to go forward. Obviously, Piers Morgan very staunchly and very fiercely denies that he was ever engaged in phone hacking or that he ever instructed anybody to do so. But as I say, this also, with regards to Piers Morgan, it does play into, I think, what has been quite a common theme of his recently, which is this sort of to and fro between himself and the Duke and Duchess. Of course, it all sort of stems back to an early friendship, a failed friendship with Meghan Markle. And, you know, I understand it. It gets a lot of people very interested, this sort of royal drama. This sort of tittle-tattle celebrity sort of gossip. It is very interesting, but also broadly what we're talking about here is trust. Newspapers trade not just on information, but also on trust. People go to them because they trust the information that they're given. 15 of 33 is, as I say, it's not all of them, but it's a substantial amount. And it's one of those things where if you begin to lose the trust of your readership or of other people that you might be interacting with, it can be very hard to get that back. Now, the phone hacking story has been ongoing for a very long time in this country. It has done a lot of damage, I think, to the reputation of certain organisations and their relationship with perhaps not the public so much, but certainly a lot of people in the public eye. I think a lot of people who consider themselves in the public eye have had to change perhaps their behaviour, how they interact with the press. Once trust like that is shattered, it's very hard to get it back, and a lot of work has to be done to get it back. And I think that that's a very damaging thing for a newspaper to have to come out and admit that this is the case.
And Amy, how significant do you think this ruling is? Prince Harry himself saying that he feels vindicated and actually even going as far as saying that the fight doesn't end here.
I think this is a monumental day for Prince Harry because
the main thing is this was never about money for him. He could have settled, but he didn't. He saw it through. And he was one of 4 test cases speaking on behalf of 100 claimants today. Prince Harry has completely shown that just because something is of interest to the public does not mean it's in the public, it's not in the public interest. And the things that he went through as a young man between the ages of 10 to 18, a lot of it, and it is shocking when you read his victim impact statement. Now, Piers Morgan was the editor of The Mirror for, I think, 2 years, and so he was overseeing the stories coming in. For a large portion of these. They picked 33 out of possible hundreds to really scrutinise and look over. And I think you put too much emphasis on the burden of proof there. They only needed to find evidence in maybe 1 or 2 to prove this situation. But Piers Morgan is adamant that he didn't know anything was going on, despite being the editor at the time, which I find quite remarkable, considering now a High Court judge has ruled that it's very likely that he did know, yet he's still standing tough and claiming that Harry's on a mission to destroy the monarchy, when Harry is clearly on a mission to find out properly what happened to him as a young man, which impacted his mental health, his friendships, his whole life. And I think he's finally putting to bed what he went through and finding some closure on that. Which is really, really important.
But Piers Morgan, as you say, denying that he knew anything of the sort was going on under his tenure. Let's move on to the Times World and this development in the Israel-Hamas war. The Israeli hostages that have been killed in so-called friendly fire. Benedict?
Yeah, it's a dreadful story, given that a large part of the reason why Israel has committed such huge military resources to its operation in Gaza is explicitly to liberate these people. And the knowledge that these 3 young men won't be coming back home because of an unfortunate accident, unclear right by their captors or whether or not they had escaped from their captors. Either way, they were identified by the IDF as a potential threat, and this has resulted in a tragedy. If one were to be sort of hard-hearted, I suppose, or sort of hard-nosed, rather, one would say that accidents like this are always likely to happen in any war zone, let alone one as quite as congested as the Gaza Strip, which, as everybody knows, very small amount of territory, a lot of high-rise buildings, a lot of sort of rabbit warrens, a lot of tunnels. It must be a very difficult situation. A war zone is always a difficult situation, but an especially difficult situation for the IDF and everybody else currently involved in that situation. That is why, of course, everybody's been reacting with such horror to the scenes that we have been seeing. But I just think at this moment in time, just a real moment of tragedy amidst what has otherwise been considered a rather effective military operation. This then hits you home. It doesn't always go your way. You don't get everybody back, and dreadful things like this do happen.
And Amy, also a journalist killed as well. But this will play very difficultly for, there'll be great difficulty for Benjamin Netanyahu, because there were families of the hostages that were marching in Israel saying that Netanyahu was more concerned about the war against Hamas rather than freeing the hostages. And now that we have these deaths under so-called friendly fire, the anger of those families will only be more intense.
I think the families of the hostages are completely within their rights to have had concerns since the bombing began, because surely it would have made sense to get those hostages out as a priority. However, I want to just take you up on a word you used there. They're liberating the people of Gaza.
No, liberating the hostages.
Oh, sorry. But you're saying it's been effective.
It has been
so far.
Thus far. The military operation has actually been
the
very
military
effective.
operation has been effective.
There's no question when you look at what the military objectives are. A significant number of hostages have been freed. We shouldn't take away from that. A lot of people many people probably wouldn't have been expecting to get back have been got back. And in terms of Hamas's command centres in the north of Gaza, yes, it has been very effective. There's been a huge civilian casualties. There have been huge civilian casualties casualties. Yes, but the ceasefire came into effect because of the effectiveness of Israel's operation. Hamas did not expect. Hamas took the evidence of the 2005 war in the north of the country with Lebanon, and also the evidence of what happened in Ukraine, actually, in the Azovstal siege, and thought it would have a much better time of siege warfare than it has actually had. Israel has been preparing for this, though, for about 15 years, and they have proven very effective. That is what was able to bring Hamas to the table, given that all of the rhetoric about Hamas was all about opposition. It was all about uprising. It was all about strength. Israel brought them to the table a lot faster than they thought would happen.
I just need to ask you, though, would you say that it has been effective when we've had the number of civilian casualties?
We won't. I mean, that's always a very difficult question because civilians always die in war.
Hang on a minute, Benedict, wait a second.
No. The question was addressed to me, so I will answer it. The key thing to remember is there is no such thing as a war that is completely sans civilian casualties. Show me the one that exists, it doesn't. And you are foolish if you believe such a thing is possible. It is always going to be a tragedy that many, many people die. I don't think anybody wants to see civilians dying, but nobody wanted to see Israelis being taken hostage into Gaza. Nobody wanted to see Israelis being murdered as they were by Hamas in the build-up. We need to remember that. We won't be able to ascertain exactly how successful this has been until after the operation has ceased.
I'll let Amy come in, but we'll acknowledge that America has said that the casualties are far exceeding what's acceptable.
Joe Biden has to say that because his base wants to hear
Amy,
that.
come in.
I cannot see how you can, on one hand, quote that 19,000 civilians have died and then deem that a success or effective in any way. I think that takes away from the humanitarian absolute chaos and tragedy that is.
How many German civilians died in the Second World War? Can you tell me?
It is a completely non-comparable situation to have a strip of land that is occupied.
Would you say that was an unsuccessful?
That is a sovereign nation. This is very different circumstances. The Gaza Strip is one of the most densely populated areas in the world. They have no means of leaving the Strip, so they are.
So was Dresden, and we set it on
fire.
No
means of leaving.
We could continue. Just want to get one more story in before the break, and that is the Alex Batty story and his grandmother. Very happy to hear his voice today. The Sun's covering this. It's on their front page. Benedict.
It's a rare good news story, I suppose. It's very often when we hear stories of children going missing, young people going missing, you do assume the worst, and we're always told there's a very narrow window in which to find them. This, it turns out, was his mother and, I believe, his grandfather who abducted him and took him to live in this commune. It's been called a sort of a hippie cult. I don't know if that's entirely accurate. A community separate.
I'm not quite sure we can say abducted, actually.
Well, I think that is how I read it phrased somewhere else. If we're not going to say that, then that's fine. That's certainly how I heard it phrased. I think it's a very positive thing that he has been found, that he has come home, and that he gets a chance to rebuild relationships with people, many of whom I suspect would have thought they would never get the opportunity to do that. So I think we should welcome that. It's a rare good news story.
Yes, it is. You're right in that respect. Definitely. Benedict and Amy, thank you very much for the moment. We are going to take a break coming up. People are waiting as long as a month to see their GP, but thankfully you only have to wait 3.5 minutes until the press preview returns. Do stay with us.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics, and even witch doctors. I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it. Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone, I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public.
My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Benedict Spence and Amy Nicole-Turner. Let's take a look at the Times, their front page story about the rise in the number of people waiting a month just to get in to see their GP. And they're quoting a private health insurer here, Vitality. They said that 40% of claims were now for private GP consultations, up from 4% in 2015. Benedict.
I think it's become an on-running theme now of how things are going in this country, is that all sort of aspects of NHS care don't work. This is all of a sort of a knock-on effect, I think, that started with the pandemic, when certain, the number of people that were being seen for all sorts of things just went down. And now, what with the on-running battles we've had between the government and various staff cohorts within the NHS, we're all seeing the end results, and that is that it's simply not working. Now, the reasons as to why that is, I think, are very obvious. Lots of people are leaving the NHS to go overseas because the conditions are better. That obviously leads to staff shortages. People feel that the conditions aren't very good. More money needs to be found. How that money is used also needs to be addressed. And this is the thing, is that, we can make the claim that the government has not handled this well. It's not. But the NHS itself has not handled itself very well with the funds that it does get. It does actually get a very large amount of funding.
So it's the fault of the NHS?
I don't think it's entirely the fault of the NHS, but I absolutely do think that the NHS could use its funds a little bit better. And I think also how we go about retaining staff is very important. Now, what is required here is not a blame game where you have one side saying it's entirely the other person's fault. You do need the government to come to the table and lead the way. It is the government. But I think aspects of the NHS also need to be less opposed to reform. And we're seeing that now with the Labour Party, with Wes Streeting going around the world, to Singapore, to Australia, and saying, actually, they do things a lot better here, based around data, based around AI, and we need to be incorporating these new techniques into speeding up the services. And I mean, right there, month-long wait to see your GP, that's unacceptable.
Amy?
Well, I think you started your timeline a little bit incorrectly there, because I think this is a result, a little equal sign of austerity measures, which then impacted our response to the pandemic and what we're seeing now. You pointed out that there is a massive recruitment retention problem because we don't pay our doctors enough. That's why they leave to go to Australia. That's why they leave to work elsewhere. But you cannot underplay the impact of austerity and the effects that it's had on this country. And that is why now we have 7.7 million people stuck on waiting lists. We have millions of people economically inactive because we stripped the NHS of its resources, and now we're seeing the consequences of that government policy decision.
On that note, I know you want to come back, but we're going to go to the Star. You've got about 20 seconds to tell us why potatoes are not worthy of being described as vegetables. Do you understand this story?
Presumably that's because Mr. Potato Head was a bit of an animal. He came to life, he wasn't just a vegetable. There was something a little bit more vital to him. I have no idea what the reason is.
Also, this is bad because the potato is the original superfood, high in vitamin C and the cure for scurvy.
So maybe it's its own category.
This is fake news.
It's fake
news.
Yeah, OK. I guess you have to buy the paper and read if there's any more to the story. What a spuddy outrage is the headline. Benedict and Amy, thank you so much for taking us through the papers. We'll see you in the 11 o'clock hour. Let's take a look at the weather for you now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, a prolonged spell of very heavy rain will affect northwest Scotland this weekend and could lead to flooding, landslides, travel disruption and power cuts. Already it's a wetter and windier picture across northern and western parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, it's a mostly cloudy start to Saturday with some spots of light rain or drizzle, mainly over western hills. Outbreaks of rain, heavy at times, will continue to affect northwest Scotland on Saturday, leading to an increased risk of flooding, mudslips and possible landslides. Elsewhere, it'll be a cloudy day with drizzly rain over western hills. It will be mild for all and windy in the north. An exceptional amount of rainfall, around 200 millimetres, could fall over the hills of Highland and Argyll, with the heavy and persistent